Solitude was published by Philip Koch in 1994. This is an encounter with both the nature of solitude and the thinkers who have written about solitude. Comprising two sections, one on the nature of solitude and another evaluating its existence, it seems to encompass the subject well without exceeding the patience of the solitary reader. Philip Koch writes about solitude as a professor of philosophy, but from heartfelt experience with versions of solitude in his personal life. Koch applies a vigorous logic to the task of definition, distinction, and description of solitude, and he writes for a popular audience as much as a well read audience so that he never leaves any angle dry and lifeless. All the disciplines are used from sociology to psychology, from literature to the study of cultures, with generous selections from writers, ancient and modern. Koch asks the essential question about solitude on behalf of all of us. He says, should I, as the days pile into years around me, move ever closer to other people, giving now out of the rich stores of past solitudes? Or should I quietly, unobtrusively, head out westward through the Hankou Pass? The essential inquiry here is which of the two is desirable, solitude or encounter? Three conditions are considered necessary to solitude, he says. First, physical isolation. Second, social disengagement. And third, reflectiveness. Koch concludes that the second factor is the only essential one. Social disengagement, freely chosen, is constructed by the person. It is a consciousness of time's passage within a subjective, or what Koch calls attentive state. From this state, the other characteristics, isolation or a sense of it, and reflectiveness, grow. He says, social situations are fraught with the need to correlate our subjectivity with other people's. The more people involved and the more correlation required, the greater the pull towards objective time. Of course, some encounters with others are easy and empathic, each party giving themselves freely to the temporality springing from their own subjectivity. Lovers feel this as a spontaneous attunement, yet even lovers feel some blocks and hindrances to the flow of subjective time, whereas solitude, the complete disengagement from others and their desiring pursuits, gives subjective time free rein. Not only is there a lightening sense of escape from the clock time framework of social engagements and from this interested time of other subjects, there is an opening upon a different set of temporal dimensions. It seems most useful, therefore, to think of subjective time as a complex product of individual passion and interest operating selectively upon independent givens. I prefer the term attentive time, which emphasizes the way in which the sense of time is determined by both the inner subject which attends and the independent subject of that attention. The points just made regarding attentive time are easily transferred to space. Solitude can shrink distances, as when warmly imagined friends thousands of miles away seem just over the hill. Conversely, the town in which one has no interest recedes into the distance. Then he summons philosophers, psychologists, and sociologists to make important distinctions. Loneliness is not only an emotion but a structure of belief and evaluation. Loneliness is perhaps the opposite of solitude. As one philosopher puts it, loneliness is the unpleasant feeling of longing for some kind of human interaction. Isolation is a physical separation from others. Privacy is the sense that no unwanted observers have access to your rightly reserved thoughts and actions. Neither constitutes solitude, where disengagement is key. Alienation is a rich concept originating in Hegel and extrapolated by Marx and the existentialists. Koch distinguishes alienation from solitude in the former being unpleasant and involving a consciousness of other that solitude does not. Finally, then, one can conclude that solitude is the state in which experience is disengaged from other people. All of the other features of solitude that come intuitively to mind, the physical isolations, the reflective cast of mind, the freedom, the silence, the distinctive feel of space and time, all of these flow from that core feature, the absence of others in one's experiential world. He notes 4 different aspects of engagement: The first, perceptual awareness. The second, cognitive focus. The third, emotional contact. And the fourth, active involvement. When all these four criteria of disengagement, perceptual, cognitive, emotional, actional, are satisfied, do we have a chemically pure case of solitude? Now, there are three ways in which disengagement is made active and conscious, and it is discussed here. The first is common objects as reservoirs for feelings and perceptions. The second is personification of actions into metaphors for human activity, which is what we do in anthropomorphizing and attaching feelings and perceptions to objects. And three, containment, wherein disengagement has a clear and conscious boundary, such as in a forest or anchor hold. Then he says solitude has five virtues: freedom, attunement to self, attunement to nature, reflective perspective, and creativity. He says, these are the perennial gifts of solitude, rich treasures whose powerful intrinsic value cannot possibly be denied. So much for the idea that solitude is merely social sleep. Now I understand how solitude works, its restoration of the spirit, and how much more it can be than simply restoration. Solitude is more propitious in itself for achieving freedom, attunement to self, attunement to nature, reflective perspective, and creativity. If sociality is intrinsically good, as it certainly is, solitude is also intrinsically good, and for at least five different reasons. In closing this celebration, what has been separated should be rejoined, for the gifts of solitude are seldom single tributaries, but on the contrary, ever flowing through each other. One such gathered feeling in solitude is serenity, the holistic state of calm, imperturbability, equanimity, and peaceful, comprehending acceptance. I have not called it a separate virtue of solitude because it seems to be a product of the first four gifts, secure in the sense of one's freedom of action, imagination, and reflection, attuned to the inner self and able to weave its failings with its glories into a meaningful pattern, attuned to the natural world of which one is a free-flowing part, yet able to apprehend reflectively both one's immersion in it and one's separation from it. This is the holistic experience we call serenity. Little wonder now that it is best found, most perfectly known, in solitude. This chapter elaborates on the virtues of solitude by identifying the fruit of the virtues as counterpart social virtues or capacities. For example, freedom of disengagement provides defining capacities for engagement, and so forth through the other virtues. We learn how to balance. He says, without a certain balancing by free encounters, the freedom of solitude tends to sicken into the free fall of loneliness. Without solitude, the self becomes stuck to its persona. The diminution of the ego, so necessary for civil encounter, is one of the best fruits of disengagement, while also the best safeguard against loneliness, which in turn is a product of too much ego. This observation is one of the more important to make concerning solitude and its virtue. Among the strengths of Koch's book are his careful inspection of the logic of solitude, his extended discussion of social disengagement, his tackling of common objections to solitude, and the presentation of so many diverse sources in numerous quotations and selections.